For a while now, me and my friend have been sharing an S5IIX rig that we use as our cinematic workhorse beast. We've shot some anamorphic stuff, a mini documentary that I still can't talk about yet, and a ton of YouTube videos. So I've gathered some long-term Lumix S5IIX thoughts, and I'd like to share them with you today because since my S5 II review came out, the initial one, some things have changed, some firmwares have updated, and some other cameras have come out. So let's get into it and see if this S5IIX is something you should consider for your work. This video is sponsored by Motion Array. So let's talk about price first. At the core of this rig is the S5IIX body, and right now, as of recording this video today, it's $1997 brand spanking new. And if you know anything about this camera, you know that's a freaking good deal. First, let's talk about the body of this camera. We all know it's blacked out, Dark Knight style, looks absolutely incredible, and I actually wish more camera companies would offer this even as an additional pay option or something, because sometimes these camera logos are ridiculously large when a lot of us shooters like to be as low profile as possible. This camera has a flip screen and an EVF, both are good. I will keep preaching this though, I want the A7R5 and GH7 style screen on every camera. Tilty and flippy. So how about autofocus? Well, in my initial review of the S5 II, I compared it to my Sony a7S III, and I said that it was about 90% of the way there in terms of its comparison to Sony. Well, some things have changed. We had a firmware update which made the Lumix autofocus even better, and I will say that Lumix is particularly good at tracking subjects like a human face. It's not quite as good as Sony in terms of just tracking an object, like if you put an object in front of the camera or you're filming something, you're behind the camera filming other objects and stuff. And Sony has the leg up with their touch tracking, which I use all the time. It's ultra convenient if you're trying to focus on a particular subject or object, or if your camera's on a slider or something. I've been doing that quite a bit lately, and touch tracking is next level. I really want Lumix to implement that in the future because their dual pixel or whatever they're doing, their pixel-based autofocus is really solid. I just want to see them implement some of those higher end features. The in-body image stabilization, IBIS, is the best. It's so good on this camera, it's ridiculous. It feels like the old days of using the GH5, and that had just absolutely incredible stabilization, but now that style of IBIS has been moved to a full frame sensor somehow. I don't know how they're doing it, but it's the best in any mirrorless camera I've ever used. It does have a particular look to it though. It's kind of floaty, which is really nice if you're going for an ultra smooth look with subtle camera moves. But if you want something that looks rugged and handheld, you're gonna wanna beef out your camera more like this and probably turn stabilization off. That's at least how I like handheld footage. I like it to feel weighted and dense. So it all depends on what kind of a project you're shooting, and it's definitely worth running your own tests before you go into a film project. Low light performance is something that I wasn't expecting to be as good as it is on the S5 II and IIX. What I've learned in time is that it has really solid mid ISO range performance versus something like the Sonys, where the FX3 and the a7S III and the FX6 are really good at 800 and really good at 12,800, but in those middle ranges, they get pretty gnarly. Whereas the S5 IIX has a more gradual ISO performance where it's solid in that 4,000 to 6,000 range that's actually a lot of times more usable than just cranking up to 12,800 and then either using ND or stopping down on your lens to get it back to be as dark as you want it. It's kind of cool that other cameras like the C400 are doing this triple base ISO. That's probably going to be like a next trend in cameras, but until then, the S5 IIX does great in that mid-range, higher ISOs. Motion Array is your one-stop shop for any video or filmmaking asset you could ever dream of, and it's guaranteed to elevate your project. They have video templates for any editing software you might be using. I use DaVinci Resolve, and I can use fun transitions like this. They have motion graphics that you can slap into your projects, high-quality stock footage that actually doesn't look cheesy, which is always a plus. But now, they also have AI voiceovers. Best part about it is you can type in
literally anything you want and find a voice to match your project.
Let's click generate and see what happens here.
OMG, Zach is so handsome.
So if you're like me and you're trying to constantly improve the quality of your videos and projects, click the top link in the description today to sign up for Motion Array. If you support our sponsors, it directly supports me and my family. So I appreciate you guys so much. Now, back to the video. Now, let's just talk about the footage for a second. It just truly looks organic and beautiful and just has a little bit of extra sauce compared to other cameras in this price specifically, but also just kind of mirrorless cameras in general. the S5IIX sensor stands out. I've been thinking about this a lot, strangely, but Lumix to me now seems like a beautiful blend of Blackmagic and Sony, where it has the high-end, organic, like creamy, gorgeous looking footage that Blackmagic has as well, and you can do B-RAW to a Blackmagic recorder, but it's also starting to get some of these nice quality of life content creator style features like autofocus, the IBIS, stuff like that. So the blend is really incredible, and the fact that it's a blend and it's cheaper than a lot of Sony stuff and some Blackmagic stuff is pretty crazy. For instance, some people are rigging out their S5IIX cameras to be very close to a Pixis, but it's even more affordable when you rig it out in a particular way versus rigging out a Pixis. So you can get similar performance to a Pixis because you get the full frame sensor, you get B-RAW to a Blackmagic recorder, but you also get IBIS. You also get really good autofocus. You get all of the options, basically. It's just something to consider. If you do want a little bit bigger camera rig, you don't necessarily have to go full cinema camera. You could do something like the S5IIX and get that level of footage or something close to it and the convenience of these content creator features. But even though it's a smaller camera, you still get things like waveform, vector scope, anamorphic D-squeeze in cameras. You can actually view with an anamorphic lens on the back of the little camera screen, and IBIS settings that work specifically with anamorphic lenses. Lumix is giving us everything we need to shoot in pretty much any way we want to, and that's what I'm learning is the Lumix way. Okay, now let's talk about the peeves, and there are not many. I really like this camera, and I think it's very well made and very solid all around. But the biggest peeve for me is the fact that in 4K 60, there's a crop. You guys probably already knew I was gonna say that, but it's just so hard for me to want to fully invest and use this Lumix camera for all of my work. When I do shoot quite a bit of slow motion, I like 60 frames per second in 4K, and I don't want it to be cropped in. And as we talked about in my last video, even the Nikon Z6 III does 4K 60 uncropped, but the A7 IV has it cropped. I don't know what's going on, but 4K 60 with no crop full frame is like my minimum standard now for slow motion. I don't really need 120 or anything above 60, but 4K 60 uncropped, please. Then the other con I already kind of mentioned is the lack of touch tracking autofocus. It's just an amazing feature that's super underrated in other cameras like Sony and Canon, and I would just love to have that on Lumix. And then finally, the last con for me is the photography shooting experience. I kind of talked about this in my S9 video, but in terms of like the feel of professional photography, I just think Lumix is outclassed by Canon, Nikon. I love how Nikons feel for photography, and Sony as well. I think Nikon might be my favorite now for photography. Just the ergonomics, the feel, like just the experience in general. I think Lumix is really lacking, and I think they could do a lot to upgrade their photography experience. I went really in depth on this in my Lumix S9 long-term review. If you want to hear me rant about it there, you can. I'm not gonna waste your time here, but as it stands, this camera, the Lumix S5IIX, is still one of the best value for money cameras on the market that you can buy today. It has unbelievable pro features and quality footage from a small, affordable camera at the cost of just a few quirks that definitely can be worked around. I wouldn't recommend it to people who are truly looking for something hybrid that's amazing at photo and video. Yes, it shoots great quality stills on paper, but it doesn't feel great to use for photography. But if you're a video shooter looking for something full frame, affordable, reliable, and incredible at making video images, the S5IIX might be your next baby girl. Text me when you get home so I know you're safe. Comment down below what cameras or tech I should check out next. Watch out for deer, because seriously, like around this time of year, they will like attack your vehicle and scrape the side of it. You might think it's your ex-girlfriend. It was a deer antler. And you are loved more than you may know. I'll see you guys very soon. God bless.